Annie Callahan, dedicated to negotiating a position for Earth within the Daguerreonian Coalition, had trained for 3 years to become an Earth ambassador. Yet, the very eve of her arrival at the capital ruling planet, she is claimed as destined mate to an oversized, mating-maddened vamp who swears he will never release her. Lord Aztaran, king of the Macian sector, has waited over 900 years for his destined mate. Having found her as an alpha vamp, he is unable to relinquish Annie, virtually holding her hostage until he can claim her. Yet Macians cannot survive without their mate's love. How could he strip her of her citizenship, her ambassadorship, and her freedom, and expect to win her heart? With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is the latest book in this exciting series, The Daguerreonian Chronicles, guaranteed to keep readers coming back for more. With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is available on Amazon.com and KahiraO'Donnell.com.
The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone Radio Show on the Mutual Broadcast Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, and the all-new IPBN Radio Network. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, and we're here with you right here in the X-Zone Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. Eastern until 10 p.m. Eastern. Then there is another show that follows ours for 3 hours. And then we are back on with the refeed of the live show that we do from 6 until 10. My guest this hour is a gentleman I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years. LaChance is his name. And Stephen lived through what most call one of the most violent haunting cases in history. In 2012, in an unprecedented move from the Roman Catholic Church, issued a 156-page report calling his haunting a clear case of demonic infestation, oppression, and possession. The haunting lasted for 10 years. In October 2006, the Discovery Channel premiered its third season of a hit show, A Haunting, with an episode featuring Stephen, his family, and friends on the haunting titled Fear House. The depiction of the show's demonic clown that has frightened many and is considered one of television's most terrifying moments. Fear House has been seen by over 26 million people worldwide. In 2007, Stephen released his first book about the haunting called The Uninvited, and it quickly gained critical praise and a worldwide audience. In 2010, Warner Brothers featured Stephen and others talking about their haunting for a documentary for the smash hit CW show Supernatural. The Warner Brothers DVD set for this show was featured the documentary hit #1 on the charts worldwide. Stephen has appeared on numerous shows, television appearances, and written media around the world, including Fox, CNN, NBC, SyFy, Chiller, the Discovery Channel, Destination America, and many more. He is currently working on many media projects, tours, and his new book, which will have its worldwide release in February 2017, titled Confrontation with Evil. Joining me now is Stephen LaChance. And Stephen, welcome back to the X Zone.
Welcome. Well, thanks for having me, Rob. My gosh, you know what I was thinking as you were going through all that. PR people write those things for you. And as you were going through all that, I was thinking back over the years of all the different things that we spoke about through the years, because you were really one of my first interviews so many years ago.
You know, I remember the first time you and I talked. I could hear the fear in your voice.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I was going through a lot at that point. I mean, everything was still pretty fresh, and I was out on the verge of trying to figure things out for myself. That's why I started into all this. I wanted answers of why those things happened to my family and to myself, and why we were living through those. And in that process of that time, other families started coming forward, and obviously the help became important for those other people out there going through something.
Stephen, these are very trying times, and I've got about a minute before I have to take my first break. Is evil on the rise?
I believe it is. I believe, it depends on what kind of connotation you want to put it in. You want to put it into a religious connotation,
yes,
or you want to take it and just put it into a simple idea of positive and negative thought.
Well, if we put it in the positive, I'm sorry.
There's a lot of negative thought, a lot of negative attitude, a lot of negative energy. If you look at it from a religious aspect, a lot of people would say that is evil. And I believe it is on the rise. I believe there is a lot of different things going on within the society today that we see time and time again that you could actually call maybe evil.
Stephen, stand by. You and I have to take a short break. We'll be right back. Exonation, Stephen A. LaChance is our special guest, www.stephenlachance.com, and we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue broadcasting around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Afterlife expert Roberta Grimes was the first one to say that dying can be fun. Now her best-selling book, The Fun of Dying, is available in stores worldwide. So if you wonder whether death ends life, how it feels to die, or what heaven might be like, The Fun of Dying was written for you. And if you have always been afraid of death, or if you worry that your life has no meaning, let The Fun of Dying ease your fears and bring new meaning to your life. Nothing said in The Fun of Dying is based on the teachings of any religion. Instead, Roberta draws on evidence to explain how death happens, how it feels, and what comes next. A lot of the best death-related evidence was produced in the first half of the 20th century. When it is put together with recent discoveries, it tells a consistent and amazing story. Roberta Grimes blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Her wonderful book, The Fun of Dying, is available on Amazon and at stores worldwide wherever books are sold. You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wiecka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiecka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Starr began to demonstrate a metaphysical connection to the spirit world as a little girl. Her family noticed the connection, but it was a great-grandmother who told the family that Linnea was indeed gifted. The great-grandmother, who was also gifted, felt that Linnea had indeed inherited these attributes. It has been noticed that oftentimes such things are passed down through the generations. Linnea was also born with a caul, a thin white membrane across a newborn's face. Legend has it that if the baby is born with this caul, the child will have second sight, or what we call psychic abilities. Linnea Starr does past, present, and future, and has the gift of prophecy. It is written within scriptures that if you are able to give factual information, and prophecies indeed come true, the gift indeed comes from the divine realm. Linnea Starr does large interactive groups as well as private gatherings. For more information on Linnea Starr or to contact Linnea for a one-on-one consultation, visit her website at www.linneastar.com. That's www.linneastar.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Stephen A. LaChance, and his website is stephenlachance.com. Stephen, your next book is on the real-life case which inspired The Exorcist. Why is this book any different than any other of the numerous books that have been written about this subject?
Well, through all of the reading that I did and all the research that I was doing when I started on this, everything seemed to follow the same line. And, and it was to the point when I got to the point where I was reading the diary, and I've had access to the diary for quite many years. And as I started reading the diary, that I realized that there was a mindset that was being followed, and there was a lot that was being missed within the actual case of what actually occurred. And that's what caused me to go into that subject. And also, at the same point, why the book was important to be written and why it's going to be different than a lot of different things is because those ideas have never been discussed. And then when I started out on the investigation and the research side of things, Rob, I stumbled across some things that have never been told before. And I think it was important, especially because, living in St. Louis where the actual 1949 case occurred, everybody has an idea of what it might be and what might have happened. The hype around it is one thing, and we can talk about that in a minute. But the other thing is that there's a lot of things that have never been really examined. And I really wanted to get into the examination of what happened to this young 13-year-old boy in 1949. And if it can happen to the innocents, could it happen to us today? And I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it.
And what did your research find about this case?
Well, one of the things that you did there right away that struck me was going through the different things in the diaries and such, is the lack of attention that has been paid on the mother's role in the case, and how she actually could have been more the target of, if there was something supernatural going on, she would have been more the target. A lot of times they want to discuss the boy and they want to say, well, the boy, was playing with a Ouija board. That's what brought the demon in. He learned this from his spiritual act. Well, you get into the diary and you go by blow of what is going on with this young boy and stuff, and you start seeing that his mother, who, by the way, was a Lutheran, as you start seeing his mother is doing things that are very un-Lutheran or very un-Christian-like, not making a judgment, by the way, but she is doing things that seem to go with more of the spiritualism side of things. I'll give you an example. There's a case in the one night where the boy, she's holding him on the bed, and the bed is going up and down. And she asked if the aunt who had just died, she asked if this is the aunt, can you knock 3 times? Well, if you stop and think about it, what struck me when I got to that point of it was, why would this Christian woman, how would she even know that would be a question to ask, number one?
Right.
And number two, why would she ask that question when her son is being harmed and scratched and all this noise and stuff is going on? And so we went down that road.
Why is it that some people are targeted for demonic possession, and there are other people who could be 100 times worse than the person that is targeted, and they're left alone?
Yeah, I think some of it is in some of the cases that I've worked in this case in particular. You always look for the target in the case, and not necessarily when we're discussing the boy and the mother dynamic here. I think the boy was probably targeted because he was innocent. Because in the eventuality, and later on in that case, it turns around on the mother. Because she's doing these things for very specific reasons, that he was not the actual target, she was. And a lot of times you'll find that in the cases where an innocent is being targeted, and a lot of times it's a child. We see a young child, or I had a case a couple of years ago where there's a 4-year girl. Exorcism took 2 weeks, by the way, where she was speaking Arabic. But it always turns out in those cases where these children show up, that it is usually the parent is the target.
Where do these...
And part of that is... I'm sorry?
Go right ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Well, part of that is, I believe, is because I think what's going on there is it's one of these things with, your child's being attacked. I went through this a little bit, too. I mean, if you go back into the case of what I lived through, my children were very much attacked before I even knew what was going on. Because there comes to that point in the case, and you see this time and time again, where the parent almost gives over to it. Take me instead of my child. Do this to me instead of that. And I think that's part of it, and we see this quite a bit within the work that we do.
Where do these demons come from?
I am not sure. I cannot tell you that I could give you the religious thing that if you want to believe that there is a hell, and that these things are down there, and they, I don't know exactly where. I don't have an answer to that. Even with the things that I've lived through, I cannot tell you that. I do know that these things exist. Now, whether they are caused by thought forms, there's a lot of people that believe in thought forms, and I know you've probably done shows on them before. These things are actually caused by us, our thoughts. We send these things into the world, which is a possibility.
Yes.
Are they something that we create with negative energy? This energy takes on a mind of its own. Or are we dealing with what religion would like to tell you, which is the idea of the fallen angel? There's all those possibilities. In my instance, I don't know. I wish somebody would come along and give me the answer. And that's what all of this work has been about for all these years. I know how to handle these things now. I know how to protect people from them, and I know how to take them from going through this to not going through this. Mm-hmm. But that answer of what these things are is not been answered yet. And I think I would be doing you a huge disservice and anybody that follows my work to say I know that answer, because I don't believe anyone does.
If these are creatures based on a religious doctrine, why is it that the person who is inflicted or targeted must go through all this hell instead of the angels coming down, casting these demons away?
Well, if you look at it from a Catholic point of view, the Catholic idea of that at some point, and I always had a problem with this because, as a kid growing up, I grew up as a Lutheran, by the way. Growing up with this idea, we were always told that God is great, God is good, right? Well, then you get this idea of evil. Well, God doesn't let anything happen to the individual unless they allow it. Well, it takes that whole idea of a loving God and kind of throws it out the window. And I have a really, really hard time with that. And I think that maybe, if you look at it from that point of view, I can take it a little bit better as, well, he knows what's good for us. And maybe it is a lesson that needs to be learned. But then you take a look at Robbie Doe, the young boy in the case from the Exorcist, the exorcism case, and I look at him and he seems to be such an innocent, and I got to wonder, well, what kind of lesson can an innocent be taught? And would a loving God use a child to teach an adult a lesson? So I have a very hard time with that.
Yeah, so do I. Why do you think Hollywood decided not to go with the facts in the case? Use Linda Blair instead of a young boy, and I understand that they took 3 separate cases to make this one case. And what did that do to the credibility of the act of exorcism?
Well, it drove this complete craziness around it, and not only that, it's a lot of it, the urban legend that surrounds it because of it as well. And I think, Hollywood, well, obviously they wanted to stay away from it because at that point, too, they wanted to be careful because the cases, they didn't want them to be labeled as such. Because the Catholic Church at that point, Rob, was still trying to keep it down. They didn't want, even at that point, when we're talking about the St. Louis portion of it, they did not even want to discuss, the priests weren't even discussing what happened to them. It wasn't later till we started hearing from Holleran, who actually was a priest that worked the case, but he was in the seminary when he was doing it. He wasn't even a priest at the time. The actual exorcist, Father Baldwin, in the St. Louis case, he did not want to have anything to do with it. He did not want to speak publicly. When he was asked about that, Father Baldwin came back with the fact of, we want to protect the boy and his family. So I think that was partially it. I think there was a lot of protection going on there of what happened to this family. Can you imagine, though? I mean, stop for a moment. And this got me. I tell you what, this really, can you imagine what it must have been like growing up as that boy in a world, that, 1973, you had this thing come out, so he would have been in his 30s at that point. Yeah. You would have been desperately trying to keep your identity withheld, and he did for a long period of time. But I have to imagine what hell that must have been, to see the whole world looking at something that was supposed to have been you at one given point.
That must have been horrific on him, and then having to relive the experience.
Yeah, relive it over and over again. And, and you got to remember, we all remember 1973, those that were living. I mean, That year was crazy. Everywhere you turned, there were scenes from that movie being played out on television, in the movie theaters, in anything that you read. It was everywhere that you looked. So everywhere that he looked, this thing was on top of it. Now, the interesting thing is...
Hold on, Stephen. We've got to take a little bit of a cliffhanger here, old friend. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, my guest this hour, is a good friend of mine and the Exxon, Stephen A. LaChance. His website is www.stephenlachance.com. This is the Exxon. I am Rob McConnell. We'll both be back on the other side as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology right here from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario. Don't go away.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Thomas Jefferson was a Burgess of 27 when he met Martha Wales Skelton, a 22-year-old widowed heiress who was fondly called Patty by her family. They were married on January the 1st, 1772, and they took up residence in a cabin on the building site on top of a Virginia mountain that Thomas had named Monticello. As Thomas and Patty slowly built their first version of the great house at Monticello, the Revolutionary War was heating up. Patty, with difficulty, bore 5 children, but only 2 girls survived. Thomas's political career developed to the point where he was often away from home, but after he authored and signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, he resolved never again to leave his wife. He was elected the governor of Virginia, just as that state became the Revolution's last battleground. The Revolutionary War ended in 1781, and Thomas gladly retired altogether to my family, my farm, and my books. But Patty continued to want to bear her treasured husband a son, and late in the summer of 1782, she died of kidney failure at the age of 33, 4 months after having borne yet another girl. Thomas was so devastated by her death that he never remarried. He mourned her for the rest of his life, even as he helped to frame the peace in France and then became the first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and the third President of the United States. This story is true. Thomas Jefferson was such an obsessive letter writer and record keeper that we know where he was and what he was doing nearly every day of his adult life. Every significant thing he says in My Thomas comes from his contemporary writings. My Thomas by Roberta Grimes is now available at Barnes & Noble, Costco, Target, Books A Million, Hudson Booksellers, Kmart, Walmart, Sam's Club, Walgreens, CVS, and online at Amazon.com. You can visit Roberta Grimes online at www.robertagrimes.com.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Unwilling to be the government's deadly assassin, gifted psychic Kahara Mitchell went AWOL and ended up buried under rubble in the wake of a great tsunami. She regained consciousness far from Earth on the medical ship of a Daguerrean intergalactic fleet. Has she been rescued or abducted by aliens? The Chalice of Carrie, Kahira O'Donnell's latest paranormal science fiction romance, is the passionate story of an Earth woman and her destined mates, twin kings from another galaxy. Kahara uses her gifts fighting alongside Lords Rom and Ra in a war that will determine the destiny of galaxies. The Chalice of Carrie by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or at Amazon.com. You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. What Happened in Benghazi is revealed by Nicholas Genix, author of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. He informs the American people that President Obama deceived them by advocating a strong foreign policy prior to the 2012 presidential election, and Hillary Clinton supported this deception. As the title infers, there is a connection between Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. Ample evidence informs Americans that Obama's early indoctrination in the Quran developed an affinity for Islam, why the Quran is the source of discontent in many countries, and why the Obama foreign policy deception led to poor military action and caused the loss of American lives in Benghazi. Genix provides 36 questions for the Select Committee on Benghazi to validate if Americans are justified to mistrust President Obama and Hillary Clinton. An overview of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi is presented on the website www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Annie Callahan, dedicated to negotiating a position for Earth within the Daguerrean Coalition, had trained for 3 years to become an Earth ambassador. Yet, the very eve of her arrival at the capital ruling planet, she is claimed as destined mate to an oversized, mating-maddened vamp who swears he will never release her. Lord Aztaran, king of the Macian sector, has waited over 900 years for his destined mate. Having found her as an alpha vamp, he is unable to relinquish Annie, virtually holding her hostage until he can claim her. Yet Macians cannot survive without their mate's love. How could he strip her of her citizenship, her ambassadorship, and her freedom and expect to win her heart? With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is the latest book in this exciting series, The Daguerrean Chronicles, guaranteed to keep readers coming back for more. With All That I Am by Kahira O'Donnell is available on Amazon.com and KahiraO'Donnell.com. Exonation, Stephen A. LaChance is our special guest this hour. StephenLaChance.com is his website. And Stephen, you're right, the 70s was a very strange time, and I don't think anybody from the 70s did not see The Exorcist. Anybody in the 70s did not, I'm sure that they saw The Exorcist, I should have said, and that they would have seen the Amityville Horror as well. When it comes to these two movies, I've heard your take on the Exorcist, but what about the Amityville Horror? That type of demonic possession.
Well, dealing with a family that is being, you look at the time in American history too, by the way, when we're looking at these films in the Amityville too, which was, we're looking at the American family and what was going on in American homes. A lot of changes were occurring, and I think that opened the door for the interest in this area to go to. But when looking at the Amityville now, by the way, one of my good friends was Christopher Quarantino, who actually was one of the boys that lived through the Amityville. And I'll tell you, there was a lot that went on with that case. There was a lot going on with that family in much the same way of what happened to my family. But I think what happened is what we saw with the Amityville and what we saw with the Exorcist as well is these cases were taken by Hollywood, and what truths were there were changed completely. I think a lot of stuff happened in the Amityville case, but I think a lot of the hype surrounding it covered the fact of what happened and how it happened. And there again, I can tell you, with talking to Christopher, and Christopher would not have a problem telling you this, there was another parent involved there. In this case, it was a stepfather who was dealing with the cult practice.
Do you think Hollywood has the right to take these cases and to make money off them at the cost of those who were involved?
I think that's the shame of it all. I've been really, really cautious, and I was really cautious. And it's not that the book on the haunting that we lived through, they have not offered to make film out of it before. It's been numerous times. But I was smart enough to realize that this would go down into history and in film history, and people would look at whatever they decided their story they were going to tell. And it would label my family and my children for the rest of our lives. And I don't think these people thought ahead enough. I thought, with the case of the Lusses, obviously, Robbie, I don't think he had any choice. I think what was done to him was criminal in a sense. Because, when you go to the church, it was supposed to have been, something that never was released. It was never meant for public consumption. And the only way that it got out there was when the diary was found. So I think that kind of is a disservice. In his case, I feel more sorry for him because he had totally no control. In the Amityville case, I have a little bit less sympathy because, Georgia Kathleen Lutz obviously went out seeking that kind of publicity. And when you go and you start playing with publicity, when you know that's saying what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Since your haunting, have you had other personal experiences? Have you been haunted again?
Every once in a while, things will come and happen. I had open heart surgery in 2011. I know. I think you and I talked about that before.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
The week before that happened, just give you an example of how crazy it can get. And it's been really calm lately. But the week before that happened, I would go into the kitchen and at any given point, and you would find all the kitchen cabinets open, the drawers, and you would find every butcher knife that we owned would be lined up in a straight line on the floor in the kitchen. And I thought that it meant that I wasn't going to survive the surgery. But obviously that was probably the purpose it was trying to play with me. I think it tries to come in occasionally, whatever that is. And when it does, I kind of change my mindset a little bit. And I look at more of, what did I do to ask this in? Is it my attitude? Am I going about things in more of a negative way that I should be? So am I feeding it? There's a lot of that because the hardest thing for any haunting, and I don't care who you are, if you're dealing with a haunting and it is of this type nature, the one thing that we have to do is, and I had to do this myself, is to find out where we participate in our own haunting. Whether it's our attitude. A lot of times we find dysfunction in there. A lot of people are going through the lowest point of their lives when they go into this sort of thing. So I re-examine my life and I look at how my world is around me and I make the necessary changes. And that seems to keep it at bay. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Now, you worked on a case that was featured on A Haunting. The title was House of Sorrows this past February, I believe. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about this horrible circumstances that were actually surrounding this case?
That case was, oh my gosh. Well, in December of 2011, I get a phone call. It was from my youngest son. He stayed all night at a friend's in St. Clair, Missouri. And he said, he called me to tell me, have you seen the news? And I said, no. And he said, well, they're taking bodies out of this house next door. Well, come to find out, it was a family of 4 people, a mother and a father and 2 children, and they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So about a year later, I get a phone call from a friend of mine who says, I just bought this house. I said, well, really? Tell me about it. And it comes to find out the house that he bought was the house where the family had died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Got it done. A great deal. Now, At that point, he goes, well, you think I'm going to be all right? Well, he already signed the papers and did the deed. There was no, at that point, saying, well, I said, well, we'll see how things go. I think you'll be okay. Well, obviously, as these things go, later things start happening. In one of the cases, he had a pit bull, and they kenneled it during the day when they weren't home. And during one of the kenneling sessions when they weren't home, something picked it up, threw it down the hallway. As a matter of fact, the whole kennel was down the hall, and she chewed her way out.
Holy cow.
And when they opened the front, when they opened the front door, she ran outside, frightened, and ran into the street, was hit by a car. So that started the whole process. Well, from there on, things started happening, and he was going down a very, very dark road. Things waking him up beside the bed, things standing there, children laughing, that sort of thing. So he called us out to help him, which we did. But the interesting thing about this case, Robin, is that when we were there, we did a little bit of the ghost box thing, where you use the radio waves to see what you can get. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it was effective because we were out in the middle of nowhere without a lot of interference. He saw that, and he wanted to borrow my ghost box, which I was like, no, you're not going to mess with this. After the blessing, you need to just let this go and start living your life and kind of forget about it. Well, what I didn't know is after the blessing and stuff, when we left the house, he gets another ghost box. Or he gets one for himself, and he brings this thing back in. And obviously, anytime it's gone and it comes back in that nature, it comes back a lot worse. And it started affecting him and his family in very, very horrible ways. And he had to have another blessing. So that's what that was all about. But what interested me most about this case was it turned out to be a series of things that happened in this house that led up to the carbon monoxide poisoning of the family, obviously. Which was very tragic. And I never worked a show before, and I had a hard time with it, where I knew I was going to be dealing with a family that had been through a lot of sorrow. Obviously, because you're telling the point of these family members have lost their loved ones, and now we're looking at this house saying, well, this stuff happened afterwards. So that was interesting. It was very difficult, and he had a lot of one-on-one with that family. And I think in the end, everybody came to a better understanding and a realization that everybody was just trying to help everybody involved.
What is the best way of getting rid of a demon that is possessing either a person or the property where the person lives?
Now, there's two ways. And now, Teresa, who I work with, I work with a woman woman named Teresa who works for the Archdiocese here in St. Louis. She goes from a strictly kind of religious route with the blessings and the prayers and that. But I've always looked at it, and I think it's a matter of just reprogramming how you view the world and what's going on within you. Humor is something that works great at these things. These things don't want you to laugh and be happy. The love of your family, of faith. Now, I'm not talking about a spiritual or religious faith. I'm talking about something more spiritual, faith in something, whether that be in love or whatever, and start focusing on those type things. And I think it doesn't require the exorcist to hit the door or someone to come in with a blessing. It requires you to be able to reprogram yourself and to deal with negative. We take a negative away, and the negative that you're supplying it, and we give it a positive. And I'm going to tell you, 9 times out of 10, that's what works.
During the exorcism, have you ever seen angels or felt a positive presence in there? And how do you deal with it?
Yes. You know what? There was, and I've always talked about this because what gets me about it, there's a point in the exorcism that, I've been involved with atheists that have been in the room for this with an exorcist. There's a moment within the exorcism that no one ever talks about because everybody likes to focus on the scary side and that. But there's a point in the exorcism where whatever this is that comes in the room, and the only way I can describe it to you, Rob, it's a very warm feeling. You feel warm from head to toe. And every time this happens, everyone in the room has tears running down their face. Now, why does that happen? And especially when you're dealing with, people that they're non-believers. But every single time that I've been through this, I've seen this happen. Now, is that the Holy Ghost entering the room, or is that an angel entering the room? Is that God entering the room? I don't know, but at that point is when there is always that change that goes from the negative to the positive. You're getting to the end of what it is that's going on there when that happens. And I have no explanation for it. And I think that's why we don't hear a lot about it, why people don't talk about it, why you don't see it shown in films and such, is because nobody's quite sure exactly why it happens. But the truth is, it does happen.
Fascinating. So why do these spirits come back? Why do these demons come back?
I am not sure. I'm not sure. I did a case a number of years ago. It was a haunted truck stop. You and I talked about that at the time I was working on it. And it seemed like all of these things, in all the EVP, everything that we were doing, you kept getting, help me, save me, help me, save me. And the thought hit my mind at that point that I wonder if hell is not a place, where we're told that it's underneath, the fire and the brimstone and all that. I began to wonder if it was more like the Jean-Paul Sartre type thing, No Exit, where hell is other people or hell is ourselves. And it being that when a death occurs, that we're not afraid to move on. We're afraid that if we move on, that we did something in this life that's going to send us to the proverbial hell, which makes that the total mind thing on ourselves, that maybe hell is not a place, but hell is a state of mind, and it's a state of mind that we put ourselves in.
Well, I've heard it said many times, Stephen, that hell is here on earth, that we make hell ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have to agree.
The Vatican basically said, you know what, Stephen LaChance's case was a real case of demonic possession. How did that make you feel when you found out that the Roman Catholic Church, said that?
Me. I got to tell you, that was I'll have to let you read this document sometime, Rob. When I sat down to read it, that 156 pages, it scared the ever-living you-know-what out of me. I mean it. I called my mom. I told her, I said, listen, I got this document, and they're talking about us, and it was the most frightening thing I've ever read. I couldn't have written something so frightening. And you know what my mother said, though?
No.
It was the wisdom that comes out. That woman is wise, but she said to me, she goes, I want you to keep in mind something. And she's a religious woman, by the way. Mm-hmm. But she said, keep in mind that what is written there is from one point of view, not all points of view. And that made sense to me. And then that thing clicked in there that this person probably doesn't, have any more of the answers than anybody else of us does. They're just looking at it from the basis of what their belief system might be. And that made sense. And I think that directed me in much more of a right area, because I look at things not from a total religious point of view, even though that's the kind of background I come from, but I can look at it with a more open eye, and I think that helps me to help other people a lot easier and a lot better.
What are your final thoughts tonight that you'd like to share with the Exo Nation, Stephen? We've got about 40 seconds.
The book on the Exorcism will be coming out in February 8th of 2017. Make sure you get it. There's a lot in there that I can't even begin to talk about yet. And maybe we'll talk about it when the time comes around. But I'm also working on a book called Psycho Killer that has to do with serial killers and the paranormal activity that surrounds them. So that sort of thing. A lot of things coming up. If you need help, you can hit the contact tab on StephenLaChance.com, and I'm always there to help anybody.
Stephen, as always, great talking to you, my friend. Blessings to you and your family. Keep the great work up, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the Exo.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you, my friend.
Take care, Stephen. Exo Nation, my guest this hour has been Stephen LaChance, and if you'd like to contact Stephen, his website is www.stephenlachance.com. That's www.stephenlachance.com. I'll be back on the other side of this short break, as I just want to ask Stephen a couple more questions. So stick around, because we're not finished yet. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Whatever you do, don't go away. We'll be right back.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multi-family dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle. reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement. These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com. All right, Exo Nation, I don't know how to explain what happened, but I'm going to try my very best. Whenever we get to the final segment, about 2 minutes before the fourth segment, we get a cue on the screen. So I'm talking to Steve, and I get this cue, and I'm saying, geez, this has gone really fast. My producer looks at me, and I look at him, and we're saying, okay. Then we hit another cue point, and it brings up the next segment, saying 4 minutes and 50 seconds left. We don't know what happened. Could it be a computer glitch? Maybe. We did have some technicians installing some new broadcast software earlier today. Or is it because Stephen LaChance is on our show and someone wanted him off the air? Stephen, what do you think that if it was that someone or something wanted you off the air, what do you think that they would want to stop you from saying?
Wow. I think one of the things, and I think it would have stopped me from talking about the new book, because one of the things that I wanted to tell you about the new book was that, think of it this way. People that William Peter Blatty, when he wrote The Exorcist, when that case and that film was out, he thought he was going to bring religion to the younger masses. And what happened with that story and what happened back in 1949 was actually the age of the diabolic. Because what we did in the end was we did not bring religion to America. We brought the devil.
Wow.
And I think that's probably what it doesn't want me to tell you. So there you go.
But between you and I and my good friend on the other side of the glass, we were able to get that message out.
We sure were. That's the message that I don't think people... But you got to stop realizing the devil is a superstar.
Yeah. Do you think that we'll ever be rid of the devil and his influence on humanity?
No, I don't think so. I really don't. Getting into some of the things... that I had to research for this book. There's so much ingrained, even within religion itself, that I don't think it would be impossible to get rid of it.
Stephen, I have a theory, and I've had this theory for many years now, that we live in a binary existence of 0 and 1s, up and down, in and out, black and white, good and evil, God and Satan. And I believe that if you were to take any one of these away from the other, the entire binary system that we call existence would implode.
I agree. Well, you have to have positive in order for negative in order for positive. It's just how the world works. So.
Well, as I said about 5 minutes ago, Stephen, it's always great having you on the show, my friend. Keep the great work up. I know that you help a lot of people. In fact, I was talking to Dan Terry, who was a police officer in Missouri, who also was a paranormal investigator. I had him on last week or the week before, and he was talking about the great work that you did helping him on a case.
It was absolutely a little case of a little boy. And there is a case where I'm sitting at the table. I'll tell you real quick, we were doing a blessing. Yeah. The holy water came by, and the father turned it on me and looked at me and said, I hate the smell of holy water.
Wow.
And so that was an exorcism, by the way.
Stephen, take care of yourself. Always. The door to the X Zone is always open for you, my friend. And I thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.
Good night, Stephen. Bye-bye, buddy.
Good night,
Exo Nation, Stephen A. LaChance has been our guest this hour. His website is StephenLaChance.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell, and I will be back. Don't go away.